Welcome, NFL football fans. It's that time again, time for another edition of NFL Football Talk. I'm your host, Charles E. Smith Jr. This is an Inside Sports production presented by Humanica Media. And thank you for joining us, whether you find us on iTunes or if you downloaded the Podbean app onto your smartphone. We definitely welcome you to the show. And we're finally down to the Super Bowl. Started a few weeks ago with 12 teams. The 12 became 8. The 8 became 4. And now we are down to 2 as the New England Patriots and the Los Angeles Rams will match up in Super Bowl 53 here on February 3rd in Atlanta. Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to break everything down. We're going to take a look at the controversy of the past weekend. We're also going to get a few of you caught up on a little bit of gambling tips because, as you know, gambling is soon to become really a nationwide phenomenon. It's going to hit you, so we just want to give you some strategies. We'll touch on a little bit of other NFL news and talk a little bit about the upcoming Super Bowl. So as you know, I don't work alone here. I do work with the help of the very, very best. So always proud to introduce a man many of you already follow on Twitter at Chris L Sports, and if not, you should be. He is, of course, a very proud graduate of Rutgers University, and he will always be my favorite East Coast intellectual. Here's the main man from somewhere in an undisclosed location in, once again, beautiful and sunny Southern California, Chris Lardieri. Hey, Chris, what's up there, man?
Charles, tremendous intro as always, much appreciated. The Super Bowl is upon us, and after the goings-on first ever 2 overtime games in the conference championships, I think we need a week off to recuperate, right?
Yeah, that was a crazy day. And, big leads that were overcome, the Rams going down. And when I looked at that first quarter, we talk about the Rams game first. In the first quarter, the Rams only had 15 total yards of offense. They were trailing 13-0 at the end of the quarter. But one of the things I said right at the time, though, when I was watching the game with my homies here, and it was that the Rams had stopped New Orleans twice in the red zone. That was a good thing. New Orleans kept getting put on a short field, and the Rams stopped them twice, held them to field goals, so it was only 13-0. Otherwise, that game could have been out of hand. And of course, as things played out, the Rams came back. It was 13-10 at the half, and then, set the table for all the drama going down the stretch.
Absolutely, and we'll address that said drama shortly. But the Saints had their chances. The Rams holding the field goal, one due to a clear touchdown that was dropped on the very first drive of the game. Mm-hmm. Kind of this bend but don't break. I mean, Michael Thomas was contained. They really held Breeze in check in the second half. I think it's one of the most unsung portions of this game that hasn't been talked about enough. The much maligned Rams defense actually showed up when they needed to.
Yeah, it's true. And in the second quarter there, Ndamukong Suh had 1.5 sacks. And also, Sean McVay, when you talk about just having courage in a tough situation, remember, they're trailing 13-0, a fake punt from about his own 25-yard line to get the ball really rolling in that second quarter. And, hey, that took a lot of guts to do that.
Completely gutsy, and I've got to think Johnny Hekker is probably one of the most accurate quarterbacks we have in the NFL. I feel like every couple of weeks he's throwing a pass on a fake punt. But you can laugh. A lot of the critics said McVay shouldn't have kicked the field goal and played for the tie late in the game. Hindsight's always 20/20. But these are the same people who said he was wrong with Dallas going for it on 4th and 1 in the divisional round, calling fake punts, questioning him on that. I mean, what gives? At that point, he's got to play the percentages. He's got some faith in his defense. I don't entirely blame him for that, but it just goes to show you, when you're a coach in the NFL, you're only as good as your last game or your last win or dodging your last bullet, whatever the case is.
Yeah, that's true. And one other thing I wanted to address on the fake punt there with Hekker was, I remember the announcer made the comment after Hekker completed that. He said, Hekker can throw as well as a lot of quarterbacks in the league. And before you think that he was just kind of overstating that, the fact of the matter is, Hekker may be able to throw. And let me just put it in context for you. He may not be able to read defenses like a quarterback, have the footwork of a quarterback, or feel the rush like a quarterback, but when it just comes to the singular thing of throwing passes, that's what they were talking about. So before you think the announcer had lost his mind, let me put that in context for you.
Yeah, so it was either Joe Buck or Troy Aikman, so it would be within reason to think they've lost their minds, but this is not in this case.
Okay, so coming down, now everyone's talking about the controversial play, and I guess there's been a lawsuit of some sort filed by some people in New Orleans who want the game replayed from when Nick Roby-Coleman makes the obvious pass interference on Tommy Lee Lewis late in the game. That would have been a touchdown. Well, maybe not a touchdown, but the Saints would have been in prime position right there. And right in front of the officials don't make the call. And what I find interesting is that if we switch over to the other game, you have Kansas City and New England. Kansas City is leading New England, and on the play where there's an interception made, which would have sealed the victory for KC, they got a ticky-tack lined up in the neutral zone call on Dee Ford, called against them, and, the rest is history because Brady got a second chance. But on the one hand, you have the officials on a home field not having the guts to make a call against the visiting team. And then on the other hand, you have the officials making a ticky-tack call against the home team in front of the home crowd. I'm not saying Dee Ford wasn't in the neutral zone, but that was a ticky-tack call.
Absolutely. And how about the phantom roughing the pass from Brady when I think maybe a gust of wind knocked him down?
Right.
Defender. Well, clearly, Charles, there are two different scripts floating around, one for Kansas City and one for New Orleans, right? I mean, it's getting like the WWE. Even before the call, I felt the belief in that game was so uneven and back and forth. There were makeup calls. In the fourth period, I texted a friend of mine and said, this is reminding me of like an NHL playoff overtime game when the refs have all but swallowed the proverbial whistle. It was just all over the place, no consistency whatsoever. And then you have the Patriots-Chiefs. And even to that replay with Edelman, was it a fumble? Was it not? But I'm going to. We've been saying since the beginning of the year, with the number of experienced refs that retired and or went into the TV booth, you've got some inexperienced refs. On top of that, you've got some crews that were realigned, and we said refereeing was going to be a problem. Well, who knew it was going to take until January for it to rear its ugly head? And then bigger picture, too, much like those of you that remember Mike Renfro's catch that wasn't a catch in the AFC Championship game in the late 70s against the Steelers. It only took 10 years or so. We got instant replay, but something's going to change drastically in the NFL in 2019 with regard to the rules.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I think for the main thing is pass interference, but I will say on that call with Julian Edelman, I watched that play many times, and even my slanted Miami Dolphins viewpoint, I saw Edelman never touch that ball. I could tell. I saw plenty of angles. It never touched him. I wanted it to touch him. I had hoped it did, but he didn't. So they did get that call right. I don't know why Romo was saying afterwards, which I love Romo in the booth, by the way, but why he said he still doesn't know when I saw all the angles. It definitely did not touch him. But, let's touching on that Tony Romo, what I found amazing is when he calls the game, when he talked about, now Gronk only had 6 catches in the game, but I remember late in the game, he's talking about, I can see the alignment, watch this, here's where the safety is, they're going to Gronk on this play. And then they go to Gronk and hit him for like 15 yards on the first down. I can see that. Why can't the defense adjust to it?
Yeah, I'm really not sure if it's a scheme, and Bob Sutton cost Bob Sutton his job yesterday, right. So he's no longer in Kansas City, or it's the lack of talent on the field that can't execute it. I really don't have a good answer. But the other thing, too, is, especially with the way the rules favor the quarterback sees the field differently, and as especially in these offenses where you're running 0 running back or maybe one is a glorified pass catcher out of the backfield.
Right.
There's so many opportunities. I liken it to when I play Madden with my son. I mean, it's just it's like a video game out there. Just pick your receiver to throw to. But back to Romo, I mean, the guy has played so recently. I think it's, I was like, wow, he can predict the plays. I think he just, from playing in this newer era of the NFL and being able to lead defenses, say what you will about him as a quarterback.
Right.
I think that helps a lot. And then let's face it, too, he gets to sit down with both coaches in the week leading up to the game. I'm sure they go over a little bit of scheme and game plan, and he watches plenty of film. So we're used to a lot of the old-time color commentators, whether they be coaches or much older former players, or you get guys that weren't quarterbacks and really add no value. Chris Collinsworth comes to mind, but that's another story for another day.
Well, wide receivers only see the game a certain way, and I can see that a quarterback has been surveying the field his whole career. But the other thing was he also talked about when the Chiefs went to a different lineup and the Pats went to a power run game and were just marching down the field and going through them like a hot knife through butter. He says ever since the Chiefs went to this smallish lineup, the smaller, quicker players, the Pats countered with the power running game, and they were just pounding Sony Michel up and down up the field in the fourth quarter.
Absolutely, and I think it's about time. I know Belichick loves rotating his running backs, but that's something to keep an eye on next week for the Super Bowl as well. Michel's really come on here in the playoffs. Look, I recommended him as far back as September to get him on your fantasy team, never mind your real football team. So I think he adds a nice dimension to that team. And the fact, too, that when you know the Patriots don't have a deep threat. You know Edelman is now Brady's favorite target. Gronk's a shell of himself. But
right.
You still can't cover him. I mean, that either says a heck of a lot about Edelman or teams are not scheming correctly. So keep that in mind, Wade Phillips.
There we go. So let's go ahead and as we encapsulate the playoffs here a little bit, I talk about, Dee Ford and the whole thing of lining up in the neutral zone. He's got to feel horrible about that. The week before, Alshon Jeffrey for the Eagles letting a pass go through his hands that leads to the Eagles' downfall. Cody Parkey missing yet another field goal. We found out later it was tipped. That's why he hit the upright. All three of these guys are probably going to lose a lot of sleep in the coming months, but it just brings me up to something here. Now, the NFL doesn't get that many gimmicks going, but, one could say the 2-point conversion is something like that. But perhaps it's time for the 4-point field goal. Now, here's the way this will work, people. You kick a field goal, if you hit the upright or the crossbar, whether the ball goes through or not, that's worth 4 points. I think good scheme, and we could see how many guys could hit the upright, and when guys start hitting the upright, you'll wonder why they couldn't split the whole middle of the uprights. So, what do you think? 4-point field goals, it would add a lot of drama to the end of games.
Here's what I think. I think that'll cause a lot of to actually make long-distance field goals because they're already aiming for the middle and they're hitting the upright. Maybe if they aim for the upright, they slice it a little and get it through or hook it a little, whatever the case is, which reminds me, Greg Zuerlein's kick, I thought for sure he was he had a nice little feed on that ball to sneak it in the right upright. He just missed out on his 4-pointer.
Yeah, you never doubt Greg the leg. Never doubt Greg the leg. And I think that's one of the things when we look at the fine lines that separate wins and losses, and they talk about special teams, the Rams are fortunate to have just two of the best as far as Johnny Hekker, their punter, who is also the best at fake punts in the league, and also Greg the leg, who is just lights out as a kicker. So the Rams have that thing shored up, and that's got to help them as they go into this huge, huge game in a couple of weeks.
Absolutely, and let's not forget, Zuerlein was hurt last year in the playoffs, so I'm sure that really affected a lot of what they did. A lot of these teams like go for it on fourth down. You've got a guy who can kick a 57-yarder in a dome, still a good 10 yards to spare. That's an asset. The field kind of you don't need to march as far down the field as you think when you've got a kicker that accurate.
Yeah, only thing is you got to remember not to go to that candy store too often because of what I've seen happen to coaches in the past was when you have an accurate kicker, as soon as you get the ball to the 30-yard line, you've got an automatic 3 points. Mr. McVay got to make sure he keeps on calling plays and calling good plays and make sure you're going for 7 and not just relying on that sure 3-pointer.
Yes, and in the case of Sean Payton, run that clock down instead of throwing the ball or getting incomplete passes.
Okay, now, one other thing we talked about, Bob Sutton losing his job as a defensive coordinator in Kansas City. Last week, right after our show, Scott Linehan, who is the offensive coordinator for the Cowboys, he was let go. And then this week, Cole Beasley, the possession receiver for the Cowboys, he kind of comes out and talks about how he hasn't been getting the ball as much as he felt he should, and a lot of those things come from the front office, and they dictate how the offense should be run. So I don't know if that was him really taking a shot at Linehan, a shot at the front office, or he's just hopeful that the next offensive coordinator will have some more pull.
Yeah, if anything, I thought the Cowboys front office involves only people named Jones, Jerry, and
right.
Probably shot at that. I heard one theory where they're saying that Jerry tells Jason what to do, and he wanted the Amari Cooper trade to look good, so they wanted him to get the ball. But Beasley made a good point. He said he gets the ball in the 2-minute drill. Plays are kind of not scripted or kind of
right
on the fly. So that's an interesting story to follow. And I was just surprised Linehan still had a job. I didn't even think he was an excellent coordinator going in, which begs the question, was he just a figurehead? Does Jason Garrett really call the plays? Does Jason Garrett really do anything? So as a Giants fan, believe me, I hope Garrett's back for many years, but I'm not quite sure what he does other than the fact that he keeps Jerry Jones happy, and every time Jerry says they might have a coaching change, he seems to pull a bunch of wins out of his pocket.
Yeah, there you go. And now he's, of course, safe for another year because offensive coordinator is gone. So obviously now he has to have time to gel with the new offensive coordinator. So even if they fall on their faces next year, it's not necessarily going to be Garrett's fault. So
Great.
What about the New Orleans Saints, though? This is the second year in a row where you have just absolute heartbreak at the end of a game. Last year was the Stephon Diggs miracle catch, and this year you have the overtime loss after that non-call in regulation time. So, what would you say to the Saints fans? You want to just give them a nice warm hug or what?
Yeah, I feel bad for them, and then the cynic in me, which, comes out often, Charles, says, look at, and Joe Buck, to his discredit, they showed highlights of Brett Favre in the NFC Championship game and how he got battered. Joe, there's a thing called Bountygate. That's why Favre got battered in that game. So getting back to the original point, maybe the football gods are having their karmic way with the Saints and saying, you got away with Bountygate. You won yourself a title because Hank Baskett couldn't field an onside kick in the Super Bowl, but you're not getting any more titles for a while. You still have some hell to pay.
All right, folks. So, we're going to go ahead and get into a little bit of, we do our Gambler's Delight special every week, so we just wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about gambling. If you do happen to put a little bit of money down, how to manage your bankroll and such. But before we get into that, Mr. Lardieri, you always have some words of wisdom for the crowd.
Yeah, absolutely. Something to keep an eye on, getting back talking to Gambler's Delight. We'll give our picks next week, but in case you didn't notice, the open Rams -1 immediately after the Patriots won the AFC Championship. Within a short amount of time, it had moved to where the Patriots were a 2-point favorite. A lot of places now in Vegas, it's as high as 2.5. Remains to be seen if it'll hit that magic 3 number. But last time this happened was the infamous Patriots-Seahawks Super Bowl, where the Seahawks opened a short favorite and ended up being an underdog by game time. So a lot of the wise guys, as they call them, had a heck of a lot of money in the Patriots in a short amount of time in Vegas.
There we go. So, hey, just to give you an idea here, we always talk about our Gambler's Delight special, and every week since I think the 4th week in the season, we've been giving you our picks. I choose an over-under, Chris chooses an underdog, and I always recommend never bet more than $20 on a game because, you don't want it to get crazy. So kind of did a little calculation here. Now, had you bet with Chris and I every single week, just putting $20 on my over-under pick and his underdog, you would now have north of $600 extra in your bank account, and only on 2 weekends would you actually have lost completely, meaning you lost 20 on each one because we were only both wrong twice during the whole season. So that's one thing is you win one, you lose one, you still push, that's a 0, and then you only got up to go from there.
If only we had invested in ourselves, Charles, right?
Okay, so that brings me to our first point here, and that is, if you're going to do any betting, remember, you got to manage that bankroll. Figure out how much you've got, what your budget is. Maybe it's $300 or something. That's all you've got. And you don't throw it at one game or anything. What you want to do is carry it through the season, because nobody's trying to you're not doing this as a way to avoid getting a job or anything like that. It's just for fun and some extra spending cash. So make sure you don't see one of these, what you think is a sure thing. Throw the whole wad at it, you wind up losing, and then, you're out of the game or you have some type of financial hardship. But the whole thing, manage that bankroll and play it like you're playing a table game. Those of you who've been to Vegas, you're either playing blackjack, $5 hands, $10 hands, or whatever. You don't all of a sudden say, I think a blackjack is coming, and just throw all your money out there. You just consistently play those types of hands.
Absolutely. And then hand in hand with that, let's say you've got a certain amount of a bankroll on a particular weekend, like the Super Bowl. Do not take, say, your whole $300 and say, you know what, I hate the Patriots and I'm on the Rams bandwagon like 98% of the country. I'm going to bet it all on the Rams to win. No. It's one thing if you want to do that, spread it out. There's this thing in investments called diversification. There's nothing wrong with doing that in the wagering world as well, especially with the Super Bowl. You got a number of prop bets, first touchdown scored, first person to pick their nose on TV. I don't know.
Right.
The list goes on.
The length of the national anthem is actually that's actually a real bet.
Too, which is a fool's bet, by the way. That's my first piece of advice for you at the Super Bowl Sunday. But things like that. Spread it out. I mean, look, even if you think the line gets favorable and you think the Rams are worth the points, you may not have a conviction on the game, but you think they're getting enough points. Do that, and then spread it out accordingly. Or even when you're in Vegas for one of the playoff weekends, let's say, spread it out among the 4 games. If there's one you don't like, sit it out. Do something else. But yeah, that's where people get into I think the Saints are going to win, or there's no way they're going to lose, and something completely fluky happens out of your control. And unless you bet with some startup book in the state of New Jersey that refunds your tickets, it's not happening in the Las Vegas sports books. I can guarantee you that.
Yeah, that's true. And we talk about diversifying. That's the thing. If you take a team and the points, let's say you must bet your full $300. Okay, take a team and the points, and then play the over/under. Something like that. So at least you got to spread out. Maybe you win one, you lose one. If you win both, that's great. That's 300. But if you win one, lose the other, still you're going to push right there. So you're okay. You just make sure that it goes in your favor. Give yourself a chance to at least walk away even. That's what it comes down to. Because trust me, they're not building all these casinos because people are winning all the time.
Absolutely not. You've got to be your own personal risk management.
And also there's that other evil, fickle temptress called the parlay bet. Mr. Lardieri, the parlay. Trust me, will sing sweet music to your ears and will make you crash your ships on the rocks. But hey, those parlays where you're going to pick 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 games and you can see those odds piling up, you can put down maybe $10 and it turns into 100 or 200 or whatever. I'll say this, parlays are tempting and I find myself attracted to them from time to time. But if you must do a parlay, keep the number small. Do not throw your whole wad at a parlay bet. They're suckers bets. That's why the odds are so large on them. You have to avoid parlays, even as tempting as they are. If you're going to do one, keep the amount you bet on them very small.
Yeah, bets are literally the lottery tickets of sports betting. Everyone goes out and plays them, and then they realize they have a better chance of getting struck by lightning. And I've seen it happen so many times. People get sucked in with those odds, and they do a 3-team parlay, and they nail the first 2, and the third comes down on a last-minute field goal or a backdoor cover, and you lose. If you really have much conviction about 3 games, bet them straight up. If you win 2 and lose 1, you're still coming home with money in your pocket. Don't worry about the odds. It's a way to suck you in. don't do it. I really cannot emphasize that enough. I know, Charles, you feel the same way, but thankfully you can't do any 3-team parlays on Super Bowl Sunday unless you try and do one of these fancy ones where you match it up with NBA games, and if you do that, you're even more completely out of your mind.
Right. And there's and those, if you find yourself throwing lots of money at parlays, there's actually hotline numbers you can call where people will help you out with that.
Absolutely.
Okay, there we go. So I think we pretty much covered the basics, and we'll talk about the Super Bowl next week. We'll pick our winners and everything, and just let you know what's coming in the next seasons as NFL football talk kind of evolves. We're going to get a little bit more into giving you the gambling picks every week and helping everybody kind of manage those bankrolls. We know there's a lot of people, more people are going to be gambling. So, hey, why not have a good source? You know, Chris and I know our stuff when it comes to NFL, and we'll also help you in that area and hopefully put a few dollars in your pocket.
Definitely. And you know, especially with what's happened with the Supreme Court essentially stating in May that it's up to the states whether they want to legalize sports gambling. My beloved home state of New Jersey, Delaware, a number of others following suit. I mean, hopefully our state here in California does. It's not as bad as people once thought it was. Look, don't get me wrong. It's addictive. People have issues with it, but people do that with lottery tickets, alcohol, you name it. Unfortunately, addiction exists in our society.
Right.
But if you're sensible, like Charles, I believe you to be, and I try to be as much as humanly possible, there's nothing wrong with placing a wager in a legal environment. Makes the game more interesting. Look, since they've kind of got that expansion of legal sports gambling on the East Coast, NFL ratings are up. I mean, I don't think that's a mere coincidence. A lot of people play fantasy football. I hate to break the news to you, that's a form of gambling too. It's not regulated, but makes it a little more interesting when you got some money on the line and your running back or quarterback gets you a touchdown and you win a few bucks in the playoffs. So you just look, even the mainstream media, the ESPNs of the world are covering this now. It's not like the old days, and Jimmy the Greek would have to tell you that in kind of code that he liked the L.A. Raiders were going to keep the game close, but they weren't going to win. He liked the points. Way different world. I mean, Brent Fussberger has his own gambling network now out of Vegas.
Yeah. There you go. And remember, the other thing is about gambling is honest. It's just fun. I do it for fun. And it's also nice when you do all your research and you put your money down. And it's more so about other than just the winning, the dollars that you have on it, but just finally it's like, I was right about something. That's the best part about it. It's just being right about something in this crazy world.
Yeah, it's a broken clock effect, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right, everybody. Remember, every single week all here through the Super Bowl and beyond, the show is NFL Football Talk. You can follow me on Twitter at @TheInsideSports. Follow Mr. Lardieri on Twitter at Chris L Sports. And as usual, Mr. Lardieri, I'll give you some final words before we sign off.
Yeah, sure. Getting back to something I hit on earlier with the NFL ratings increase, I was reading too, like even throughout the playoffs, the numbers were up. I heard Patriots Chiefs had a gargantuan number. It's good to see that all those people who said they'd never watch the NFL again came back. Whether it was the presidential election 2 years ago or fallout from national anthem protests, goes to show you football fans as well as Americans in general have a short-term memory. But thinking back to it, I really think, and we kind of hit on this, there's a lot of offense this year, made it more interesting. Patrick Mahomes was a great story. The Rams, Drew Brees and the Saints, he breaking the passing record. People like action. I mean, they like sports. There's a lot of scoring, but by the same time, they like to see a defense make a stop here and there and win a game, as we saw in the last few weeks in the playoffs. But you say what you will with all the rule changes, concussions, whatever. You're not going to get more bang for your buck in professional sports than with the NFL. I know the NBA is getting more popular. People like to watch it. It's high scoring. But honestly, I want to talk about bad refereeing. Watch an NBA game. I could use a travel every 2.5 minutes or seconds or whatever the case may be. But baseball's a great sport come playoff time, but try sitting through a 162 nine-inning games. So really doesn't surprise you and me, Charles, but it is nice to see that the noise, as it were, has kind of died down and people actually are putting their eyeballs back on the sport.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, one other thing before we go, I forgot to cover this, but point spreads in NFL games. You'll see, Chris, we were talking about the anomaly when the New England Patriots, they opened as a 1-point underdog, and now they're about a 2 or 2.5 point favorite over the Rams. But if you could briefly talk to the public out there about the reason why the point spreads move, it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with scouting reports coming in on teams or an injury or anything like that. The other reason and the real reason why point spreads move.
Oh, absolutely. So it has to do with supply and demand from your economics 101 class in college or high school, whatever the case may be. So what happens is Vegas does not they're not trying to take a side. They're not trying to pick a winner. They're not trying to say, hey, we want all our money on this side. They want an even amount of money on both sides. They want to try and minimize their risk, because when you place a bet and you lose, say you put a $20 bet down on the point spread, they will keep what's called the VIG, 10%. And that's where Vegas makes their money. That's their bread and butter. They're not looking to make these big risks. They just want to keep pocketing that 10%. Hand in hand with that, when large sum of money comes on a team, in this case the Patriots, they have to adjust the line, because if they just keep that line with the Patriots at -1, all the money is going to pile up on the Patriots side. No one's going to want to bet the Rams. So due to the miracle of this thing called supply and demand, Vegas adjusts the line to try and even it out. Someone like me might say, hey, I may have bet the Patriots over here, but someone else may say, oh, I like the Rams all along. They're a little more appealing getting the points, and it'll even things out. So there's your primer on that. Don't think I'll be a college professor on this stuff anytime soon, but if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at Chris L. Sports.
There we go. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening. Remember, the show is NFL Football Talk. This is an Inside Sports production. And for Chris Lardieri, I'm Charles E. Smith, Jr. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see everyone next week.